The fastest way to lose someone is to believe they'll never be able to live without you. Ethan Carter had always liked corner offices. The higher the floor, the better. From 32 stories above downtown Chicago, the city looked organized, predictable, almost obedient. That morning, sunlight spilled across the glass walls of the conference room as managers settled into their seats with coffee cups and laptops. A low buzz of conversation floated through the room. Everyone was waiting for the introduction of the company's new regional director. Ethan leaned back in his chair and checked the time on his watch. He wasn't nervous. Why would he be? He had spent the last 5 years building a respectable career, climbing one promotion at a time. Whoever the new executive was, they'd eventually learn to trust him. Across the room, people exchanged rumors. Some said the director had come from New York. Others claimed she had led a major corporate acquisition. Nobody seemed to know her name. The uncertainty only made the room more restless. Ethan smirked and took another sip of coffee. The conference room doors opened. Instantly, conversations died. A senior executive stepped inside first. "Thank you all for being here," he said. "I'd like to introduce the person leading this region moving forward." Ethan straightened slightly, more out of courtesy than curiosity. Then another figure entered. A woman, tall, confident, dressed in a charcoal suit that seemed perfectly tailored for the role she carried. She moved with calm precision, not rushing, not hesitating. Her heels clicked softly against the floor. Ethan's fingers froze around his coffee cup. The room blurred for a second. No, it couldn't be. The woman reached the front of the room and turned toward the audience. Her expression remained composed, professional, unreadable. But Ethan knew that face. He knew those eyes. 5 years disappeared in an instant. Vanessa Brooks, his ex-wife. The same woman he had once watched carrying grocery bags into a small apartment after long work shifts. The same woman who used to wait up for him at night while he chased promotions and bigger opportunities. The same woman he had convinced himself was part of a chapter he had already closed. Around him, employees began applauding. Ethan couldn't move. His heartbeat thudded heavily in his chest. Vanessa acknowledged the applause with a polite nod. No dramatic smile. No visible shock. If she was surprised to see him, she didn't show it. "Good morning, everyone," she said. Her voice was steady and confident. "I'm excited to work with all of you and help this region reach its next level of growth." Ethan stared. The voice was familiar, yet completely different. Stronger. Sharper. The uncertainty he remembered was gone. As Vanessa outlined her vision for the company, people listened closely, taking notes. Every word carried authority. Every sentence sounded earned. Ethan barely heard any of it. His mind kept returning to a single question. How? 5 years ago, he had walked away believing he was moving toward a brighter future. Vanessa had stayed behind. At least that was the story he told himself. Yet here she stood at the front of the room while he sat among dozens of employees waiting for instructions. Then came the final blow. The executive beside her smiled and gestured toward Ethan's division. "One of your first meetings this afternoon will be with the operations management team. Ethan Carter will be presenting quarterly performance results." For the first time, Vanessa's gaze shifted directly toward him. Only for a second. Long enough for recognition. Long enough for the past to quietly step into the room. Then she looked away and continued speaking as if nothing had happened. Ethan lowered his eyes to the conference table. 5 years ago, he thought he had left Vanessa behind. Sitting there beneath the bright lights of that conference room, he realized she hadn't been behind him at all. Somehow, she had ended up far ahead. 5 years earlier, before the glass offices and executive meetings, Vanessa Brooks lived in a third-floor apartment above a small grocery store on the south side of Chicago. Every morning began before sunrise. The sound of delivery trucks rattled the windows while the city was still dark. She would stand in the tiny kitchen, pouring coffee into a travel mug, reviewing bills spread across the counter. Rent, utilities, student loans, numbers that never seemed to get smaller. Across the room, Ethan Carter was usually focused on something else. Business articles, leadership podcasts, career plans written neatly inside expensive notebooks. Back then, Ethan believed his future was waiting somewhere ahead of him. Vanessa believed their future was something they were building together. That difference seemed small at first. It was not. In those days, Vanessa worked long hours for a logistics company while Ethan completed his Master of Business Administration program at night. She often picked up extra shifts whenever unexpected expenses appeared. Sometimes she returned home after dark carrying takeout containers because neither of them had energy left to cook. Ethan would thank her without looking up from his laptop. She told herself it was temporary. Success required sacrifice. That was what people always said. Winter arrived early that year. Snow collected along sidewalks and buried parked cars under white layers of ice. One evening, Vanessa climbed 3 flights of stairs carrying grocery bags while freezing wind followed her through the stairwell. When she opened the apartment door, she found Ethan sitting at the dining table surrounded by textbooks and notes. The heating system struggled against the cold. Vanessa set down the bags and rubbed warmth into her hands. Ethan barely noticed. He was rehearsing answers for an upcoming internship interview. She smiled anyway and asked if he wanted dinner. Looking back, she would remember that moment more clearly than many others. Not because anything dramatic happened. Because nothing happened. No appreciation. No curiosity about her day. No recognition of the effort holding their lives together. Just another quiet evening disappearing into the next. Months passed. Ethan earned a prestigious internship. Then another opportunity. Then another. Each achievement pushed him closer to the career he wanted. Vanessa celebrated every milestone. She framed certificates, organized small dinners, encouraged him before presentations. She became the person standing behind the spotlight. At first, Ethan seemed grateful. Then something changed. Success has a way of revealing what people truly believe. During company events, Ethan started introducing Vanessa differently. He no longer spoke about her sacrifices. Instead, he described her briefly before shifting conversations back toward his ambitions. Sometimes she noticed him scanning rooms filled with executives and future opportunities while she stood beside him. It was subtle, almost invisible, but subtle changes often arrive before major ones. One Saturday afternoon, they attended a networking event downtown. The ballroom glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Men in tailored suits exchanged business cards. Women discussed investments and promotions. Vanessa watched Ethan move through the crowd with growing confidence. For the first time, she realized he looked completely comfortable in a world that seemed determined to leave her behind. On the drive home, city lights streaked across the windshield. Ethan talked excitedly about new connections and future possibilities. Vanessa listened quietly. Somewhere between his stories, she noticed something missing. Every plan he described began with the word I, not we. By the time they reached their apartment building, snow had started falling again. Ethan hurried inside while answering a work email. Vanessa remained beside the car for a few seconds longer, watching flakes drift beneath the streetlight. A strange feeling settled in her chest. She could not name it yet, but for the first time, she wondered whether the life she was helping build still had a place for her in it. The distance between two people rarely appears all at once. More often, it arrives one quiet disappointment at a time. After that winter, Ethan Carter's career accelerated faster than either of them had expected. New responsibilities appeared. Bigger projects landed on his desk. Executives began remembering his name. His calendar filled with meetings, networking dinners, and business trips. Every achievement seemed to push him farther toward the future he had always imagined. Vanessa Brooks watched it happen from a few steps behind. At first, she felt proud. Every late night she had worked, every extra shift she had accepted, seemed worth it when she saw him moving closer to his goals. She believed success would eventually bring them back together. Instead, it slowly pulled them apart. Their apartment changed. Not physically, emotionally. The small living room that once held conversations now held silence. Ethan spent more evenings answering emails than speaking with her. Dinners grew shorter. Weekends disappeared beneath conference calls and travel schedules. Vanessa learned not to expect much. She learned how to eat alone without feeling lonely. At least at first. One spring evening, rain tapped softly against the windows while Vanessa prepared dinner. The smell of roasted chicken filled the apartment. Candles flickered on the table. It was their anniversary. Nothing extravagant. Just a simple evening together. She checked the clock. 7 o'clock became 8. 8 became 9. Her phone remained silent. When Ethan finally walked through the door shortly after 10, his tie loosened and his attention fixed on his phone, he looked surprised to see the table set. Was something planned tonight? He asked. Vanessa stared at him for a second. Not angry. Not shocked. Just tired. Our anniversary, she said quietly. Ethan's expression changed. A flash of guilt crossed his face before disappearing beneath exhaustion. I completely forgot. Vanessa nodded and forced a small smile. The candles continued burning between them. Neither touched the food. Moments like that became more common. Birthdays postponed. Promises delayed. Conversations interrupted. Ethan never intended to be cruel. That was part of the problem. Neglect often hides behind good intentions. Months later, Ethan received an offer from a prestigious consulting firm. The salary was higher than anything he had earned before. The opportunity felt like validation for years of effort. That night, he celebrated with colleagues at an upscale restaurant downtown. Vanessa arrived late after work and listened as everyone congratulated him. Across the table sat a woman named Claire Morgan, a senior consultant from another division. Smart, ambitious, confident. She and Ethan spoke easily with one another. They laughed at the same jokes, finished each other's thoughts. Vanessa noticed it immediately, not because anything inappropriate happened, because Ethan seemed more present in that conversation than he had been at home in months. During the drive back, city lights reflected across the windshield. Vanessa sat quietly in the passenger seat. Ethan talked about future promotions, future cities, future opportunities. Again and again, his plans revolved around himself. Finally, Vanessa asked a simple question. Where do I fit into all of this? The silence that followed felt longer than the road itself. Ethan tightened his grip on the steering wheel. What do you mean? Vanessa looked out the window. Every future you describe sounds like it only has room for one person. Ethan did not answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his words landed heavier than he intended. Maybe we just want different things now. The car continued through the sleeping city. Vanessa felt something settle inside her. Not heartbreak. Not yet. Clarity. For years, she had been carrying the weight of a partnership. Suddenly, she realized she might be carrying it alone. A few weeks later, Ethan came home earlier than usual. The apartment was quiet. Evening sunlight stretched across the floor. Vanessa looked up from the kitchen table when he entered. His face seemed unusually serious. He placed his keys on the counter and sat across from her. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then Ethan took a slow breath. I think we need to talk about our future. Vanessa looked into his eyes. Deep down, she already knew what was coming. She simply did not know that within the next hour, the life she had spent years helping build would no longer belong to her. The conversation lasted less than an hour. The consequences lasted years. Evening sunlight faded behind the apartment windows as Ethan sat across from Vanessa at the kitchen table they had bought together during their second year of marriage. The room felt strangely still. Even the refrigerator's low hum seemed louder than usual. Ethan kept his eyes fixed on the wood grain beneath his hands. Vanessa listened quietly while he explained that they had grown apart, that their goals no longer aligned, that neither of them was truly happy anymore. The words sounded carefully prepared, polished by repetition long before they reached her ears. She noticed how often he spoke about the future and how rarely he spoke about the past. Years of shared sacrifices disappeared beneath a handful of professional phrases. When he finally stopped talking, silence settled between them. Vanessa looked at the man she had loved for nearly a decade. He seemed relieved, not cruel, not angry, just ready to move on. That realization hurt more than any argument could have. Is this what you want? She asked softly. Ethan hesitated for only a second. Yes. The answer landed with quiet finality. Vanessa lowered her eyes toward the table. Her wedding ring reflected the last traces of daylight. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Then she nodded once. No dramatic scene followed. No shouting. No desperate attempt to change his mind. Some endings arrived too clearly for negotiation. Over the following weeks, paperwork replaced conversations. Lawyers exchanged documents. Accounts were separated. Furniture was divided. Every signature seemed to erase another piece of the life they had built together. Vanessa completed each step with calm professionalism. Friends expected anger. Family expected tears. Instead, she became quieter, more reflective. Ethan interpreted her silence as acceptance. He never realized how much strength it required. The day the divorce became official arrived on a gray morning in early autumn. Clouds hung low above the city. Leaves scattered across sidewalks beneath a cold wind. Vanessa left the courthouse carrying a folder filled with documents and stood for a moment beside the building steps. Around her, people hurried through their ordinary routines. Cars moved through traffic. Construction crews worked across the street. The world continued exactly as it had before. Yet everything felt different. She slipped the folder into her bag and walked away alone. A month later, Ethan moved into a modern apartment closer to downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the skyline. The building had a fitness center, concierge service, and rooftop lounge. It looked like the life he had always imagined. Meanwhile, Vanessa downsized. Her new apartment sat in a quieter neighborhood several miles away. The rooms were smaller. The furniture was simpler. Some nights the silence felt overwhelming. She would sit beside the window with a cup of coffee and stare at the city lights in the distance. Questions visited her often. Had she wasted years supporting someone who had already outgrown her? Had she ignored warning signs because love made them easier to overlook? Yet beneath those questions, another realization slowly emerged. For years, much of her identity had been attached to helping Ethan succeed. She knew his ambitions better than her own. She knew his goals better than her own dreams. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped asking what she wanted from life. One Saturday morning, nearly 3 months after the divorce, Vanessa woke before sunrise. The apartment was dark except for a thin strip of orange light beginning to appear beyond the horizon. She sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and a fresh cup of coffee. For the first time in years, no one else's plans occupied the page. No schedules, no sacrifices, no compromises, just empty space waiting to be filled. She picked up a pen and stared at the blank paper. The future looked uncertain, lonely even, but for the first time in a very long time, it belonged entirely to her. As sunlight slowly filled the room, Vanessa wrote down a single sentence at the top of the page. It was not a promise of revenge. It was not a plan to prove anyone wrong. It was something far simpler. She wrote, "Start again." And that morning, without realizing it, she took the first step toward becoming the woman Ethan would one day be forced to answer to. The hardest part of starting over was not the lack of money. It was learning how to believe in herself again when nobody else was watching. The first year after the divorce moved slowly. Vanessa Brooks built her new life one routine at a time. She woke before sunrise each morning, brewed coffee in the small apartment kitchen, and reviewed online coursework before leaving for work. Her dining table became a classroom. Her couch became an office. Sticky notes covered the refrigerator. Industry reports filled shelves that once held wedding photographs. Some nights exhaustion followed her home like a shadow. Yet she kept going. Not because she felt strong every day, because she no longer had the luxury of waiting until she felt ready. Chicago changed with the seasons. Winter gave way to spring. Spring melted into summer. While the city moved forward, Vanessa quietly transformed with it. She enrolled in certification programs related to operations management and supply chain strategy. She volunteered for projects others avoided at work. Whenever an opportunity appeared, she accepted it, even when she doubted herself. Especially then. Months turned into more than a year. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Vanessa found herself sitting in a conference room reviewing a logistics problem that had delayed a major shipment. Several managers discussed solutions without reaching a conclusion. Numbers covered the screen at the front of the room. Frustration filled the air. Vanessa listened carefully before speaking. Her suggestion was simple, direct, practical. Within minutes, the room fell silent. Heads turned toward her. The proposed solution addressed issues nobody else had noticed. The meeting ended shortly afterward. Vanessa returned to her desk expecting little more than another workday. She did not realize someone important had been paying attention. A week later, she received an unexpected email requesting a meeting with the company's vice president of operations, Robert Whitmore. The message arrived shortly before lunch. Vanessa read it twice to make sure she understood correctly. Robert Whitmore was known throughout the company as someone who rarely wasted time. Employees spoke about him with equal parts respect and nervousness. His office occupied the top floor of headquarters. The meeting lasted less than 30 minutes. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. Robert sat behind a polished desk while reviewing performance reports. After several questions, he leaned back and studied Vanessa carefully. "Do you know why I asked you here?" he said. Vanessa shook her head. Robert smiled faintly. "Because you keep solving problems nobody assigned to you." Vanessa was not sure how to respond. Robert continued. "Most people focus on the responsibilities attached to their position. You focus on improving the entire system. That is much harder to teach." Those words stayed with her long after the meeting ended. For years, Vanessa had measured herself against what she had lost. That afternoon marked the first time someone evaluated her based on what she could become. New opportunities followed. Robert became an informal mentor. He recommended training programs, introduced her to senior leaders, challenged her assumptions. Whenever she achieved one goal, another appeared waiting beyond it. Vanessa accepted each challenge with quiet determination. Meanwhile, Ethan Carter continued building his own career elsewhere in the city. Their paths never crossed. Occasionally his name appeared on industry announcements or professional networking sites. Vanessa rarely clicked on them. The past no longer demanded as much attention as it once had. Her focus remained fixed on the future. 3 years after the divorce, Vanessa received a promotion into corporate operations. The position came with greater responsibility, higher expectations, and access to projects affecting multiple regions. On her first day, she walked through the headquarters lobby carrying a leather portfolio and paused briefly beside the glass entrance doors. Sunlight reflected across polished marble floors. Employees hurried in every direction. For a moment, she remembered the woman who had once sat alone in a small apartment staring at a blank notebook. That version of herself felt distant now, not forgotten, just transformed. As she stepped into the elevator, her phone vibrated with a new message from Robert Whitmore. It contained only one sentence. "You are closer than you think." Vanessa looked at the words for several seconds before slipping the phone back into her bag. She did not know exactly what he meant, but somewhere above her current position, another door was already beginning to open. Success rarely announces itself when it arrives. More often, it appears disguised as another long day of work. Nearly 5 years had passed since Vanessa Brooks wrote the words "Start Again" in a notebook beside her kitchen window. The woman who entered corporate headquarters each morning now carried herself differently. Not louder, not colder, simply certain. Experience had replaced hesitation. Discipline had replaced doubt. The transformation was visible to everyone except Vanessa herself. She remained focused on the next challenge, the next problem, the next opportunity to improve. One Monday morning, she arrived before sunrise to prepare for a strategic review meeting involving executives from multiple regions. The city skyline glowed faintly beyond the glass walls surrounding the conference room. Fresh coffee filled the air. Reports covered the table. As employees filtered into the room, conversations quieted whenever Vanessa spoke. Her reputation had grown steadily over the previous 2 years. People trusted her judgment because she earned that trust repeatedly. By the end of the meeting, several senior leaders remained behind to discuss future restructuring plans. Vanessa gathered her notes and prepared to leave when Robert Whitmore asked her to stay. Once the room emptied, he closed the door and walked toward the windows overlooking downtown Chicago. "Do you know what separates managers from leaders?" he asked. Vanessa smiled faintly. "I assume you are about to tell me." Robert laughed. "Managers maintain systems. Leaders improve them." He turned toward her. "You have been doing that for years." Vanessa listened quietly. Robert rarely spoke without purpose. "There is going to be a major acquisition," he continued. "Several divisions will merge. New leadership positions will be created." Vanessa nodded. Corporate acquisitions happen regularly. She expected the conversation to remain general. Instead, Robert handed her a confidential folder. Her name appeared inside. For a moment, she simply stared at it. "I recommended you," Robert said. "And the board agreed." Vanessa looked up. "For what position?" Robert's expression revealed the answer before he spoke. "Regional director." The words seemed to hang motionless between them. 5 years earlier, Vanessa had worried about paying rent. Now one of the largest companies in the industry was offering her responsibility for an entire region. She felt pride, gratitude, disbelief. Yet beneath those emotions existed something quieter. Perspective. She understood exactly how far she had traveled to reach that moment. Meanwhile, across the city, Ethan Carter believed his career was progressing exactly as planned. He held a respected management position within a growing logistics company. His salary was comfortable. His office was larger than before. His professional network continued expanding. From the outside, everything appeared successful. Yet growth had slowed. Promotions arrived less frequently. Younger employees were beginning to compete for the same opportunities he once claimed effortlessly. Ethan noticed it, but rarely acknowledged it. Like many ambitious people, He remained focused on where he expected to go rather than where he actually stood. Several weeks later, rumors began circulating throughout the industry. A major acquisition was underway. Companies would merge. Leadership structures would change. Executives would be reassigned. Employees speculated endlessly about possible outcomes. Ethan followed the news with mild curiosity. He had no reason to believe it would significantly affect him. One afternoon, an email arrived announcing that his company had officially become part of a larger corporate group. The message described future growth opportunities and promised new leadership announcements soon. Ethan skimmed the details before returning to work. He never paid attention to the list of executive candidates attached at the bottom. Had he looked more carefully, one name might have seemed familiar. Weeks passed. Meetings were scheduled. Organizational charts were updated. New reporting structures appeared. Excitement and anxiety spread through offices across multiple states. Employees wondered who would lead them once the transition became official. Ethan wondered too. On the morning before the final announcement, he stood beside the office windows watching sunlight rise above the city. His reflection stared back from the glass. Confident, experienced, certain of what tomorrow would bring. He had no idea that by the next day, the past he thought he had left behind was about to walk through the door and completely redefine his future. The first real test of power is not what you do when you rise. It is what you do when the people who underestimated you are standing directly in front of you. The afternoon sunlight stretched across the executive floor as Ethan Carter stepped out of the elevator carrying a presentation folder that suddenly felt heavier than it should have. The hallway was quiet. Thick carpet softened every footstep. Glass walls reflected the skyline beyond. At the far end of the corridor, a polished plaque displayed a title he had already memorized. Regional Director. Beneath it was a name he never expected to see again. Vanessa Brooks. Ethan stopped for a moment before the office door. 5 years earlier, he had walked away believing he understood exactly who Vanessa was and exactly what her future would look like. Now he was standing outside her office waiting for permission to enter. A voice from inside invited him in. The office overlooked nearly the entire city. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows. Awards lined one shelf. Strategic reports covered a conference table. Everything about the room reflected responsibility earned through years of work. Vanessa stood near the windows reviewing documents. She looked up as Ethan entered. For a brief second, neither spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was simply honest. Time had changed both of them. Ethan noticed details immediately. The uncertainty he remembered was gone. Vanessa carried herself with quiet confidence. She did not appear interested in proving anything. She did not need to. The office already told that story. "Good afternoon, Ethan," she said. Her tone was professional. "Calm. Please, have a seat." Ethan sat across from her at the conference table. The chair felt strangely small. Vanessa opened a folder and glanced at the quarterly reports. No mention of the past. No acknowledgement of their history. Only business. The meeting began. Ethan presented operational metrics, project timelines, staffing forecasts, and budget performance. Normally, he spoke with confidence. Today, every sentence felt measured. Vanessa listened carefully, occasionally asking questions. The questions were precise, thoughtful, focused on details most executives overlooked. More than once, Ethan found himself pausing before answering. Not because she was intimidating, because she was prepared. The realization unsettled him. Throughout their marriage, he had always viewed himself as the ambitious one, the strategist, the future leader. Sitting across from her now, he began seeing parts of Vanessa he had never taken time to understand. 40 minutes passed. When the presentation ended, Vanessa closed the folder and folded her hands. "Overall, the division is performing well," she said. "There are opportunities for improvement, but the foundation is solid." Ethan nodded, relief mixed with embarrassment. He hated how much her approval mattered. Vanessa stood and walked toward the windows overlooking Chicago. The city stretched endlessly beneath the afternoon sky. Ethan remained seated. For a moment, neither said anything. Finally, he spoke. "You have done well." The words sounded inadequate the moment they left his mouth. Vanessa turned slightly. A faint smile touched her face. Not a victorious smile. Not a bitter one. Simply polite. "Thank you." That was all. No accusation. No reminder of the past. No attempt to make him uncomfortable. Somehow that hurt more than anger would have. Ethan realized she was no longer carrying the weight of what happened between them. She had moved beyond it. Before leaving, he paused at the door and glanced back. Vanessa had already returned to work, reviewing reports and making notes. The meeting that had consumed his thoughts for weeks had become just another item on her schedule. As the door quietly closed behind him, Ethan walked down the executive hallway with a feeling he could not ignore. For the first time since the divorce, he understood something that should have been obvious years ago. Vanessa had never needed him to succeed. She had only needed the chance to believe in herself. Some victories arrive with applause. Others arrive in complete silence. 3 weeks after their first executive meeting, regional leadership gathered at headquarters for the annual strategic summit. Senior managers, directors, and executives from multiple states filled the largest conference hall in the building. Conversations echoed beneath high ceilings. Screens displayed growth charts and performance metrics. Coffee stations lined the back wall. The atmosphere felt important because it was. Decisions made during the summit would influence the direction of the company for years. Ethan Carter sat near the middle of the room reviewing presentation notes. Around him, employees discussed the company's recent acquisition and the rapid success of the new regional director. Vanessa Brooks had become one of the most talked-about leaders in the organization. Her results spoke for themselves. Operational efficiency had improved. Employee retention had increased. Several struggling divisions were already showing signs of recovery. People respected her because she consistently delivered results without seeking attention. Ethan listened quietly while others praised her leadership. Each compliment reminded him how little he truly knew about the years following their divorce. The summit began shortly after 9 o'clock. Executive presentations covered financial growth, expansion plans, and future initiatives. Hours passed. Then came a session dedicated to leadership recognition. The company's chief executive officer stepped onto the stage and smiled at the audience. "Before we conclude today's program," he said, "we want to recognize a leader whose work has transformed not only a region but an entire organization." A large screen illuminated behind him. Vanessa's photograph appeared. Applause immediately filled the room. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. The chief executive officer continued. 5 years ago, she joined this organization through an operations role. Since then, she has led some of the most successful improvement initiatives in company history. Her recommendations have influenced multiple acquisitions, strengthened regional performance, and helped shape our long-term strategy. More slides appeared. Charts, projects, achievements. Ethan stared at the screen. Some accomplishments were so significant he could hardly believe they belonged to the same woman he once thought he understood completely. The presentation continued. Mentorship programs, operational redesigns, cost-saving initiatives that impacted millions of dollars, regional growth records, industry awards. Each slide revealed another layer of a journey he had never witnessed. Around the room, executives nodded with admiration. Vanessa sat near the front, composed as always. She did not appear proud or uncomfortable. She simply listened. When the chief executive officer finally invited her onto the stage, the applause lasted longer than before. Vanessa walked forward beneath bright lights and accepted the recognition with characteristic grace. "Thank you," she said. "None of these accomplishments belong to one person. They belong to every employee who chose to show up, work hard, and believe improvement was possible." The audience applauded again. Ethan lowered his eyes briefly. Years earlier, he had believed success belonged to the individual. Vanessa had somehow learned something far more valuable. During the networking reception afterward, groups formed throughout the hall. Executives introduced themselves. Employees exchanged business cards. Conversations flowed easily. Ethan stood near a window overlooking the city while observing the crowd. Across the room, people gravitated toward Vanessa naturally. Not because of her title, because they respected her. The distinction mattered. At one point, Robert Whitmore approached Ethan. The older executive glanced toward Vanessa before speaking. "Remarkable leader, isn't she?" Ethan nodded. "She is." Robert smiled. "The interesting thing is that her greatest strength was never intelligence. Plenty of people are intelligent. Her greatest strength was resilience." Ethan looked toward Vanessa again. She was speaking with a group of managers, listening more than talking. Calm, focused, confident. Robert continued. "Most people become successful after others believe in them. Vanessa became successful before anyone did. Those words followed Ethan long after the reception ended. Later that evening, as employees departed and lights dimmed throughout headquarters, he found himself standing alone in the nearly empty lobby. For years he had measured success through promotions, salaries, and titles. Yet the woman he once left behind had achieved something far greater. She had earned respect without demanding it. She had built a future without seeking validation. And for the first time, Ethan understood that the true reversal had never been about positions on an organizational chart. It was about becoming the person she was always capable of being. Several months passed after the summit, and life inside the company settled into a new rhythm. Projects moved forward. Teams adapted. Targets were met. From the outside, nothing appeared extraordinary. Yet for Ethan Carter, something had changed. It was not his position. It was not his salary. It was the way he saw the past. Some realizations arrive years too late. On a cool autumn evening, long after most employees had gone home, Ethan remained at his desk reviewing reports. The office lights reflected softly against the windows, while downtown Chicago glowed beneath the darkening sky. His computer screen displayed performance data, but his attention drifted elsewhere. Across the building, a light still shone from the executive floor. Vanessa was working late again. That detail no longer surprised anyone. She had earned her success through thousands of ordinary moments that nobody applauded. Ethan understood that now. Slowly, he closed his laptop and walked toward the elevator. A few minutes later, he found himself standing near the executive offices. The hallway was quiet. Through the glass walls, he could see Vanessa standing beside the windows of her office. The city stretched endlessly below her. She appeared thoughtful, peaceful, completely at ease. Not because life had been easy, because she had survived everything that tried to make her smaller. Ethan did not knock. He did not interrupt. Instead, he stood there for a moment and reflected on the woman he once believed he had outgrown. Years ago, he thought success belonged to the person moving fastest. He thought ambition alone determined who would win. He never understood that character mattered just as much. Perhaps more. Vanessa had never chased recognition. She had never tried to prove anyone wrong. While he spent years measuring achievement against other people, she spent those same years becoming a better version of herself. That difference had changed everything. Eventually, Vanessa gathered her files and prepared to leave. As she stepped into the hallway, she noticed Ethan standing nearby. For a brief moment, they looked at one another. No tension, no resentment, just two people who had traveled very different roads. Working late? Vanessa asked. Ethan smiled slightly. Apparently not as late as you. Vanessa laughed softly. The sound carried none of the sadness that once lived between them. They walked together toward the elevators. When the doors opened, Ethan hesitated before stepping inside. Vanessa, he said quietly. She turned toward him. Yes. He searched for the right words. The words he probably should have said years earlier. Finally, he nodded. I am glad you found everything you were looking for. Vanessa studied him for a second before offering a gentle smile. I did not find it, she said. I built it. The elevator doors closed. Ethan watched her reflection disappear behind polished steel. Then he looked down at the lobby far below and felt something unexpected. Not regret. Not jealousy. Respect. Meanwhile, Vanessa stepped back into her office one final time before leaving for the night. She walked to the windows and gazed across the city she had once crossed alone, carrying doubts, fears, and unanswered questions. Those questions no longer defined her. The past no longer defined her. She had not returned to win back the man who left. She had not climbed higher to make anyone feel smaller. She had simply become the person she was always capable of becoming. The lights of Chicago shimmered beneath the night sky as Vanessa picked up her coat and headed toward the door. This time, she did not look back. She did not need to. She had never won him back. She had won herself.